Hello, and welcome to NACM's 2021 Annual Conference Video Bonus Sessions. On behalf of NACM President TJ Bement and President-elect and Conference Chair Kathy Griffin, welcome to today's session. NACM would also like to acknowledge the generous support of the State Justice Institute for their support of this and all the programs of the annual conference. We would like to thank the Conference Development Committee for creating this educational programming for 2021. My name is Jude Del Priore, and I'm a former NACM president and presently assist the association in education planning. With me today is Erin Carr, NACM Association Manager. Today's program is being pre-recorded as a bonus to both live and virtual conference attendees. Our presenters have provided their contact information that will be uploaded and posted with this video in the event you have any questions after viewing. Today's session, Surviving the Storm, Leading Effectively Through Adversity. Whether it be global pandemic, social unrest, an economic downturn, or internal challenges, adversity is a true test of leadership. Today's presentation will equip you with tools and strategies to weather the adversity and effectively lead your team to continue meeting expectations and producing great results. We are pleased to have with us for today's session, Randy Anderson. Randy has an extensive, impressive bio, which will be uploaded to the conference website, but I'd like to highlight just a few things about Randy. Randy is co-founder of E3 Professional Trainers, a Lubbock, Texas-based training firm that provides workplace and life training for individuals, teams, and companies. Before starting E3 in 2005, Randy spent 20 years in sales and sales management. It is from that experience that he draws the ideas and strategies to help his clients improve their performance in the workplace and to achieve their maximum potential in life. Randy was awarded the prestigious designation of Certified Speaking Professional in 2012. This is the highest earned designation given by the National Speakers Association. Randy received his Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Communications from Texas Tech, and his most valuable experience has come through 30 years of on-the-job, real-world experience, 12 of which were spent managing others and another 14 plus years running his own company. Randy, it's all you.
Well, thanks so much, Jude. I appreciate the opportunity to be with y'all today. I wish I could be with you in person. I know that COVID has changed many things, and I think we're yet to see the end of that, to run its course as far as the impact it's going to have. But certainly appreciate the opportunity to join you, whether it's virtually or in person, and kind of share with you ways that I think you can increase your leadership effectiveness and just your impact in life through your work. I think when we look at leading through adversity or navigating through a storm such as that, for many of us, that's one of the big struggles and one of the areas where probably most of us would say we could stand to gain a little bit. Let me say before we start, the pre-recorded format really doesn't allow for the type of presentation that I love most, which is very interactive. Some of you may remember I was with you several years ago in Los Angeles for your mid-year conference, in San Antonio for your annual conference. I then visited several state associations and spoke after that. And if you've seen me at any of those, you know that I'm very interactive. I like to be very conversational, and certainly the Zoom format doesn't allow for that as much, but I do want to offer to connect with you in any way that you would like to. I'd be willing to answer any questions that you have about ideas that I throw out. I'd be happy to talk with you about how you can make those a reality and how they can work for you in your workplace, in the real world. I am not big on abstract, philosophical, theoretic type stuff. I really want applicable, practical things that you can use. And I will also at the end tell you how you can get several, I guess I would say, complementary tools that kind of go with what we're talking about today, that may help you to implement those if you need that. And so stick with me till the end, and I'll tell you how you can get those no charge, no hassle, no pain or strain on that. And so with that, let's jump into this. When I think of adversity and I think back on the times when I've had to lead and manage through adversity, quite often I think that was the times when I maybe grew the most or learned the most. And so, as much as we hate going through it, sometimes it's the best thing for us long term. And I think we have to start. The old axiom, start at the beginning. I think we have to start and just think about what is adversity. We can look at that many different ways. And if you just look in the dictionary, it says difficulties or misfortune. But when you or your organization is going through adversity, I would have to say that certainly understates what we feel. When we're trudging through that and we feel like we're bogged down in mud and just can't move, that certainly seems to underscore the experiences we're having. Difficulties and misfortune sound very toned down compared to the reality of navigating through something that totally disrupts our world, and wherever the disruption came from. When we've got you've got a job to do. And in recent years, especially since '08, and I look at it, and what I see in most industries is the manager's job is now you're filling a role of the team and overseeing the team, where at one time it was more just oversight. Now it seems more and more that managers have their own list of things that they're expected to do and are having to work on. And so whether the adversity is personality differences or conflict, whether it's caseload that you're trying to manage around, maybe it's competing priorities, or we're understaffed, a key team member left, or we added a new team member that really changed the dynamic of the team. And it could even be non-work related issues. And we're going to talk about those in just in a minute. But when we begin to think about that, leading through adverse circumstances typically, again, is the greatest test of your leadership. Now, you can manage problems, and you can manage lists, and you can manage calendars, and we can manage people, but leading through adversity, leading through the difficult times, is something that really is the most critical determiner of organizational success. Can you withstand those times? Some of the ideas I suggest today really should be considered and addressed before adversity happens, but obviously, you can't back up. And if you can utilize them to work through the adversity, but then address some of those things when you're in a less tumultuous time, when you're in a less, just difficult period, then that may help you to avoid some of the adversity that could come later on if we ignore those things. And so I think the first thing that you've got to ask yourself, is it your goal to manage the adversity or to lead your people out of it? And if we are managing our adversity, it's a high likelihood it's going to last longer than it would if we lead our people out of it, if we lead our team out of it, we lead the organization out of it. And I would say this, regardless of positional authority, regardless of whether, I want to do this, but my boss won't. I want to do this, but our commissioners won't. I want to do this, but our city council won't do. You've got to look and say, okay, how much influence, how much impact, how much effect can I have on the problem without anyone else's okay or approval, without an added budget line item or whatever that may be. And so, we really want to look at that today. And I think that starts with identifying, what causes adversity. And I mentioned several a minute ago, and we're fixing to go back through those kind of one by one and look at it. But when we think about what causes adversity, a lot of times it didn't come from something that was necessarily foreseeable, but it could have come from something that we could have been more proactive about. Something that we could have set better systems in place or better processes in place or equip people better ahead of time before it came to that. And when we look at it, what causes adversity, we want to back up and look at root causes. We don't want to look at symptoms. Symptoms are the actions we see or the result of the adversity, but we want to really look at what caused it. So let's look at several of those. Number one, you may be your own worst enemy. It may be that our desire to protect ourselves or to promote ourselves or to create an environment that is good for me is not what's best for the organization. And so, maybe you have some health challenges that are contributing to that. It could be that you've got distractions outside of work even that are taking away from your ability to be able to really effectively lead the right way that you want to. And it could be that they're work-related distractions. But it could also be, a lack of engagement or lack of motivation. And if you're disengaged to some degree as the leader, it's going to be really difficult for you to get other people engaged. So it's going to be difficult for you to get the best out of them if you're not giving your best to the organization and to the problem. Another place it may be coming from is your teammates. And when you look at your teammates, infighting, I find to be one of the biggest hurdles, one of the biggest obstacles to productivity, to organizational productivity. And so if you've got teammates who are fighting or who are bickering or arguing, complaining, in conflict constantly, whatever the case may be, there's a lot that can go into that. There's a lot that can cause. So here are a few questions you want to ask. First one is, who are your high maintenance team members? Who are the ones that are really, really high maintenance? Who are your low performing team members? Who are your drama causing team members? Are they bringing drama into the mix and it's making it that much more difficult for you to manage? Are you underestimating how much they're costing you? And I'm not saying you need to necessarily fire them, but you do have to address that. Are you doing your job in regard to managing those individuals in those situations as the leader, as the manager? Are you doing your job there to make sure that doesn't continue to grow and continue to be a big problem? Another thing is demanding customers, and your customers may be judges, your customers may be attorneys, your customers could be any number of people. Again, it could be a board or a body, a governing body of some sort that you've got to answer to. But those customers, whoever they may be, could be making your job harder than it needs to be. And again, if we don't accommodate for that, if we don't build around that or try to address that, then that's going to continue to just roll, unregulated. It could be just current conditions. Now, if I'm talking to a private entity, a retail company or a production company or something, well, we can talk about market conditions and everybody kind of knows we're talking about stock market. But in your world, it could be social unrest, as it said in the intro. It could be political concerns. It could be political situations that are contributing to that, and who's in and who's out, and who's new and who's gone, and different things. And what is that triggering in our community? And that may be, overflowing into your world. And then finally, I would say it could be peripheral contributors. Now, whether it's a virus, whether it's people bringing personal things to work, their family situation, whether it be maybe your courthouse, maybe the courtrooms are under construction or being remodeled. And so you've got less square footage to utilize to try to schedule everything. And it could even be something climatological. Maybe there's a hurricane in your area. Maybe there's a flood in your area that has put everything on hold for a while and caused a backlog. I live in Texas. Back in early February, we had the Great Freeze where more than half of Texas was without power for days. Everything just shut down for a week. Well, that puts you, that much more behind what you already were. And so who could have, we could predict cold. We couldn't have predicted that. And, it's hard to prepare for that many people being without power for that long. So again, there's just a lot of things that can go into that. And, I think if we don't take into account all that is going into the recipe, then we stand a high likelihood of not really doing a thorough job of working through it, leading through it, and really solving the adversity. A guy named Jim Collins, in his book, Good to Great, it's an older book, it's a good book, it's definitely not nightstand reading, but it's a great book, it's just a kind of a difficult read. He talks about the importance of facing the brutal facts. So you've got to look and you can say, okay, if it's me, I need to fix that. I may have to find help. I may need to get somebody to help me, but I've got to find a way to fix me if I'm going to try to fix others, if I'm going to try to lead others. If it's team members, we want to push toward collaboration. We want to provide coaching. We want to do correction when it's necessary. If most of the adversity that you're dealing with is internal, in other words, it's between your team members, then one of the things you may need to diagnose is the level of employee engagement. And do you need to address employee engagement, which would help solve some of the adversity that you're experiencing? If it's customers, can you influence it? Can you control it? You can't make people play well in the sandbox. You can't make elected officials do what you want them to do. All that can happen there is if they do a poor job of it, you want to make sure that the next time people are educated and understand. And I know that you're limited in what you can do there. If it's in retail, I would say to people, is that customer worth the anxiety that they're causing. But you can't choose who your customers are. They are who they are. And they're going to be in your courts regardless of what your personal feelings are about them. Are they affecting or infecting others? In other words, are they bringing toxicity to the recipe beyond just what they bring themselves, but they're polluting other people and causing them to feel that way? What would it take to rectify the problem? I mean, if you could just make the list, if you could just wave the magic wand, what would it take? Would there be necessarily that we reestablish an agreement or an expectation between the two of us? Look, here's what the reality is, and here's what we're able to do, and here's what we need to agree to. Here's what I need you to understand. Um, you know, if not, then you're resigning yourself to accepting the fact that's going to exist. And then you have to retool your systems and processes to work around that. If you're not able to control it, if you're not able to act on it, then you've got to react to it and go about things differently. There's a guy named Ernest Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton led what was supposed to be the first transcontinental expedition to Antarctica. In other words, they were going to sail to Antarctica and walk across it. This was in 1914. As they got to the South Seas, the ship became ice locked and froze in place. They had to abandon ship because it was going to be crushed by the ice. They lived for almost a year and a half with just less than 30 men. And if I recall correctly, I think only one person died during that time. But he went from a goal of making it to Antarctica and mapping it and walk acrossing it to surviving, just to making it back home safely with his crew. And so it may come to a point where you've got to change your overall strategy in order to be able to lead effectively. So we want to identify the practical realities of the adversity. We want to diagnose and then triage. So here's some questions that you can ask yourself in that regard. Number one, was it self-inflicted? Or was this adversity a result of external contributors? Were there things that we did to ourselves, or was this completely brought on by the outside, again, by something that was legislated, something that was voted on by a community or a city or a municipality or a county or whoever it was, wherever it came from the outside? Because if it's all internal, I can respond one way. If it's external, I have to react a different way. The second thing, is this adversity affecting others too? Or just my team, just my department, just me and my coworker, just the planning department, just the court management group that's here? Are other courts experiencing the same thing? Is collaboration an option? Could I ask somebody who's not in the court system, how do you handle something like this? Could I ask a business owner that I know, how do you deal with employee challenges such as this? Could you confer with other courts? Maybe a municipal court or county court or district court or some level that's higher or lower than you, or in another state or another county. Could you confer and collaborate with them? Could you find resources within NACM? People that you've met through conferences or through other things that you could ask them, what are y'all doing in the midst of this? Are there other public service teams or individuals within your area? That maybe you go to the water department and you ask them, hey, what do you do when you have a customer who comes in and is just really, ridiculous expectations, hard to deal with? What do you do with them? Codes enforcement people deal with that a lot. What do we do when we have somebody and you're trying to enforce something that you didn't set in place, but it's your responsibility? Are there people there that you could collaborate with? And, I will tell you is one of the advantages of adversity is quite often, once you go through it, those who survive it, I hate to say survive, but we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Those who survive it and make it through, a lot of times it weeds out the more negative, the less committed, the more problematic employees. Now, there's some that you're just going to have to do. You're going to have to create a paper trail, do whatever your human resources department says to get rid of them. They interviewed well, turned out to not be the person you thought you were hiring, and now you're stuck with them. But in many instances, they'll leave the adversity and go somewhere else where they think it's not going to have as many problems. The thing is, they may be a part of the problem. They're going to take the stink with them. Well, good. I'm glad to see you go. I'll help you load your boxes in the trunk of your car. But we've got to realize that there could be some positives there. Next thing you want to ask yourself, is this temporary or is it most likely permanent? Is this a change that is likely not going back to the way things were? Can you make short-term adjustments on this as opposed to dramatic long-term changes? In other words, when in my think about it in my world, and here we sit today on a virtual presentation, I went from 99%, 99.9% of my engagements being in person to about 99% being virtual last March, April, May, before things began to creep back toward normalcy. And again, I live in Texas, and we kind of got back out and going a little bit before some others. But the big live events. Here I sit mid-June. I just did my first large conference in over a year last week, and so that was a temporary change, but it was a significant change. However, I'm beginning to see that I'm going back toward more and more and more in person. There are other things that are not ever going to go back to the way that they were after an economic meltdown, or after a legislation change, or after an elected person is instated into an office, whatever it may be. But you want to look and say, am I expecting this to be here for a long time or not? You may eventually be able to go back to the way you were doing things, but ask this question: do I really want to go back to the way we were doing things? Would it benefit us to go back to the way we were doing it? Or are there things that have come about that are a good change? I look at COVID, and one of the real positives, just look around at restaurants. They're doing a much better job of cleaning in restaurants than they were before. One particular restaurant here, I see them, and they're very diligent on cleaning the top of salt and pepper shakers and dispensers, and the little caddy that sits on the table that has barbecue sauce in it and things like that. They're being very diligent about that. And I never thought about it before, but before COVID, I didn't know if the 3-year-old who sat there before me had licked the top of the shaker or not. I don't know. So there's some things we don't want to go back to what we were doing before. So when you think about, the changes that you've made, especially as a result of COVID, if that's still affecting you, has it changed hours? Has it changed methods? Has it changed accommodations that you're making toward not having to have people in the courtroom? Has it changed your head count? And will that change any? Will you be able to go back to a larger head count again? But just consider those and think about, which ones do we want to keep? Which ones do we want to discard? Which ones do we want to look at it and say there's going to be, a mixture of those two things? Will the adverse circumstances, will whatever it is you're going through necessarily, in other words, is it unavoidable that it's going to affect your long range strategic plan for your court, or the organizational objectives you have? So maybe you've got a judge and they had a goal of reducing caseload or backlog by this much and doing this, and the district attorney is working to try to make more plea agreements outside of the courtroom. Whatever that is, whatever the long-term strategic plan was, is the adversity necessarily going to change that, or has it just happened to change that? And again, I don't want to get hung up just on COVID, because I can't tell you what the adversity will be next, but I can guarantee there will be some. And there are some that dictate or necessitate changes. Others, we just kind of let those things come, and we didn't do anything to control it when it came. One thing you have to know: different people respond to adversity in very different ways. And a lot of this is personality driven. Some of this is priority driven. Some of this is generationally driven. Some of this is just my personal agenda. What is my long range plan? But when you start thinking about how adversity affects other people, some are going to just kind of have a wait and see. I'm not sure what to think about this. Some are going to be excited. Some are going to be really upset and fearful of it. Some are going to be mad and angry. Some are going to, I don't really know what to think about this. The kid, the bottom in the middle. And the girl, I'm just going to see what you do with this, because I think you're going to screw this up. But they're going to respond differently. Don't take that personally. You've got to try to win them toward what it is you want them to do. But some people flourish in adversity and some don't. I mean, that's just a fact of the world that we live in. It's same with change. I use this exact same slide, full disclosure. I use this exact same slide when I'm talking about leading people through change, because some people respond to change differently than others do. Some people will flourish in it. Some people are just going to run and hide from it. And some people are going to kick and scream and yell. You've got to filter out the unnecessary emotional circumstantial evidence, the unnecessary emotional response, the unnecessary emotional reaction. Let them get past that, and then talk in terms of, what is this going to mean for us long term? How's this going to change what we're doing? I touched on this a second ago, and I'm going to come to it in more full front right now. In the midst of adversity, most people's main goal is survival. Now, what survival means to an individual may be different. Is it personal comfort? Is it I want the path of least resistance? Is it that I want security, that I want to know I'm going to have my job? Is it just that I want to have peace and quiet in my job and not have to battle a lot of fight a lot of battles? But for the most part, they just want to survive themselves. You're going to have to lead them to climb the mountain, to climb the hill, to overcome the barrier that is there. You're going to have to develop their level of engagement, increase their level of commitment. You may have to add to their competency. You may have to provide training on that. It may be that you have coaching, but you're going to have to lead them through that in order for them to really successfully survive that and not just hunker down and hope for the best, because a lot of times that won't be enough to really do it. One of the things I find a lot of places is internal territorialism, and that is likely an enemy for you. When you don't come tell us how to do our job, we won't come tell you how to do yours. Don't come talking to my employees. You come talk to me. I don't want you to correct them. And, that's hard for me to understand, but, I can just tell you with individuals, that may be a difference in personalities, competing personalities. It may be competing priorities. That one is wanting to ascend to a higher position. One is wanting to be thought of as a leader or a manager. For some people, it may be vindictiveness. They may just still be mad about something that happened a few months ago. And so they're going to take that out on this current situation. They're going to stand their ground kind of angrily. If it's between departments, you may have some of that same thing, but quite often with departments, it's again, because you have two different agendas. So you may be dealing with another department or another entity that they just have a different goal in mind for what is going to be good in this situation. And you've got to try to work with that or around that. I think one of the best things you can do there is to cultivate an atmosphere, a climate of collaboration, of teamwork, where we foster that along the way, because if we're thinking together towards solving problems or creating new ideas and systems, then it's going to be easier to think together on how do we overcome the adversity that we're going through, as opposed to, hey, I know we've kind of always done our own thing and been off in our own corner, and suddenly I want to try to draw us together in a think tank. That may not go well the very first time. So again, this is one of those things. Could we cultivate that before the next big adversity arises so that they're more accustomed to that when we get there? I think it's very important that you hold your organizational principles. What are those kind of written or unwritten, said or unsaid? Here's the way we run our court. Here's the way we run this courtroom. Here's the way we work with judges and attorneys. Here's the way that we serve the public. Here's the way we provide information to people who are seeking information about what we're doing. You got to have in mind, what are the values that are there? These are the things that just won't be compromised. What's the vision? In other words, what are we trying to become? What are we trying to create while we're doing this? What's the mission? The mission is the difference you're going to make in history. Once you're gone, once you've retired, once your name has been scratched off the roster, what's going to last from what you did? And what will your time there have counted for? That's what you want to hold to, like an anchor holds a ship in place. It can still bob on the water. It can still float in regard to where the anchor is, but it's not going to get away from where that anchor landed. Circumstances are going to change. There may be, again, legislation that comes down within your industry as a whole, or maybe something that happens where you are that will affect how you do things. But I can tell you that if your organization operates based on long-range vision, long-range principles, what you're trying to accomplish won't change, even if your methodology has to. And I can just tell you, and you've probably seen this, not all organizations subscribe to that. Some are just kind of going to do whatever comes easiest for them. So I would encourage you and challenge you, hold to those whenever possible. I heard this several years ago. I wish I could give attribution on this, but I cannot remember, and I cannot find where I got this. But I want to challenge you to adopt an and mentality rather than a but mentality. Here's what I mean by this. You come up to a roadblock, you come up to a detour. Do we think of it as I've got to do this and the detour is there, or I've got to do this, but the detour is there? I need to get to the top of that hill and turn right up there where those arrows are. But there's a detour here, so I can't get up there. Different way to look at that, when we put the but in there, it gives us an excuse on why we don't have to or why we can't. But if I substitute the word and, I need to get to the top of that hill and turn right where those arrows are, and there's a detour here. Well, that's just two facts that have to be taken into consideration. The first way, I need to get there, but says, here's a fact, but here's an excuse. When I say there's a detour there, or I need to get to the top of the hill, and that's there, well, that's just two different considerations that I'm working to plan around. So let me give you an example. We need to reduce our caseload, but COVID has put us even further behind. We need to reduce our caseload, and COVID has put us further behind. So that's a different way to look at that. We need to reduce the backlog here, but fill in the blank has kept us from being able to reduce it. We can't get things going any faster. We need to reduce the backlog, and we've continued to fall further behind. So that means you're going to have to change your strategy a little bit. We are understaffed, but we have a current hiring freeze. We're understaffed, and we have a current hiring freeze. Well, then I've got to change the assignment of tasks or the delegate responsibilities differently or whatever. See, that's what I mean. We need X more than ever, but our primary vendor who provided that for us, service provider or whatever it is still not working full time back in their office. We need X more than ever, and our primary supplier is still not back to normalcy as a result of the virus. So when you adopt that and mentality, it really changes where you are. I think when you look at it, people are more important than things. And if you ever lose sight of that, you're simply managing, not leading. The team has got to be more important than the individuals. So it's the people that matter more than the processes of the systems. It's the team that matters more than the individual person. And so, you've got to communicate often. You've got to really be willing to be candid. Some people are good at that and some people aren't. Candor is tough. There's a cost to it. There may be an emotional cost. I couldn't sleep the night before. I couldn't eat lunch today because I knew I was going to have this confrontation, or I knew we were going to have this meeting. There's a cost to it. But if you will be committed to creating that candor and looking at things in a realistic way, this is true and this is a reality also, then we can move to where we create that culture of this is not an excuse. This is just another consideration that we've got in there. And this is a fact also. Okay. Allow your team members to give feedback, even if it's not 100% positive. I don't want this to turn into, a rant, but I also don't want people to feel like they can't voice their concerns, voice their ideas, voice their frustrations in a constructive way. And again, I'm going to avoid the fight. I'm going to avoid the conflict. I think one of the best ways to do that is one-on-one instead of in a group where mob mentality can take over. But I want to give people that forum or that format or that venue where they can voice their frustrations in a constructive way, because who knows, they may have the best idea yet, and we've not tapped into that. When they're doing that, listen and empathize. Listen and empathize with those who are affected by this. And empathy being, I don't have to adopt your mindset to understand how you got to your mindset. I don't have to roll around in the mud with you to understand how you got dirty. But I do have to listen. I do have to think about it from your perspective or from your side of the world. And, that's one of the great emotional intelligence qualities that you can exhibit is empathy, to where people truly believe they've been heard and you care about what they're saying. Help your people direct their energy towards solving the problem rather than toward complaining about it. We have X amount of energy in our body. From the sleep we get, the diet we have, the exercise plan we're on, we generate X amount of energy, mental energy, emotional energy, physical energy. If we're giving that energy to complaining, to frustration, to resignation, to whatever it may be, and we're just tired from dealing with all the stress, we have no energy left to solve the problem. So part of leadership is, can you recruit them or conscript them or compel them or whatever the case may be, persuade them, inspire them, whatever you want to put there, to be creative instead of complaining. and use that energy in a constructive way to help us move out of the adversity as quickly as we possibly can. Because again, you may not be able to control how quickly you can get out of it. You may not have been able to control what happened, so you may not be able to control how you get out of it. But if we're working on solving it, the energy is better spent than just complaining about it. And again, that's part of your job as the leader, is to do that. I want you to think about these industries a year and a half ago. The bicycle industry was, I mean, they were still selling bicycles. You could go to a sporting goods store. Academy is one that's all over the nation. You go to Academy, and they always had bikes in there of all shapes and sizes. Hand sanitizer was something that we thought about, especially if we'd been in a public place or whatever, rubbing on handrails or touching different things. And you think back, did your mom telling you to wash your hands? Well, now you can carry it in your purse, stick it in your glove box, have it at your desk or whatever. How many of you thought about plexiglass before March of last year? How many of you thought of fashionable face masks before March of last year? How many of you had ever used Zoom on a regular basis before March of last year? But after March of last year, you couldn't find a bicycle in a store. Hand sanitizer was at a premium. Plexiglass was everywhere. Face mask became a reflection of personality, and Zoom became a common word in the house. So the question you want to ask yourself is, does the adversity create any new opportunities in your world? Could it allow for you to create greater efficiency in some way? Would it make sense to utilize virtual for some of the things that you do going forward? Maybe you never did before. Well, now we've got this capability in place. I mean, think about poor kids in school these days. Snow days, they're a thing of the past. Because now my kids' school, if we had a snow day, they just said, hey, we're going virtual today. No more days of playing out in the snow or whatever. You're going to school. You're just going to school online, because now we're all of a sudden set up. The teachers are well versed in it. The kids are used to it. The parents know what to expect. What positive could come out of that we could hold on to? Could it possibly make some of your customers more willing to work with you rather than continually working against you, or so it feels like? That's a question that you can ask yourself as well. You've got to take the time to identify your team members' strengths and weaknesses. And here's what I would encourage you to do. Ask that through the lens of the current adversity, or the filter of the current adversity, rather than what you interviewed them for when they first came to you. Because at that time, we're just looking at a to-do list, not a to-fix list, not a to-overcome list necessarily. Look at their strengths and weaknesses and how they have responded. The current circumstances may have brought several things to light that you didn't realize before. Maybe they're not very self-aware. Maybe they don't demonstrate as much self-initiative. So they started working from home and it seemed like it took longer to get things out of them. Maybe they don't have the self-discipline to stay there if nobody's looking over their shoulder and checking to make sure they're going to meet a deadline. Or, hey, it seems like you've been on break doing laundry for 30 or 45 minutes. Well, if they're on a coffee break at the courthouse, I know that. But if they're working from their dining room or their utility room, I don't really have any way to know that. Maybe they don't do well with self-management. The quality of their work, the thoroughness of their work, the order of priority that they're putting into that. How good of a teammate are they really? Like, did they work hard to continue to be engaged with the team while they were at a distance? Have they worked hard to work with the team during the adversity, not necessarily COVID, during the adversity that you've gone through recently, or did they kind of go off and do their own thing? Did they say, hey, just tell me what to do, I'll do my part, but don't ask me to do anybody else's part? How good of a teammate are they? Have you discovered that they have a greater need for social interaction? That they really need that. Everybody in a team meeting once a week in a conference room or your office together looking face to face. Were there peripheral disruptors that you've discovered that may be infringing on them when they're in the office, between kids or between distractions from home, things like that? And are there technical or technological problems, challenges that you've uncovered that maybe you didn't know so-and-so was great with computer, techno jargon, mumbo jumbo, whatever it is? I'm a technophobe. And anybody seems smarter than me, but all of a sudden you've discovered that somebody who has nothing to do with your IT department was the most helpful person on your team during the last adversity. And maybe you can plug them into different responsibilities, different tasks, or as a part of the team who's going to overcome some adversity that you face down the road. What is your plan? So as you identify weaknesses, what is your plan for helping your team members to improve on those things? How are you going to coach them or better equip them? What training do you need to provide for them? Could you match them with another person on the team to be somewhat of a mentor for them? And when you look at their strengths, what are you going to do? What is your plan to further maximize those, especially if you've discovered new strengths that you didn't know were there? How can you best utilize those to respond to future adversity? Some people are very creative thinkers. I'm a very linear thinker. I've had to make myself be creative. Linear meaning once I start down a certain line of thinking, it's hard for me to change and go somewhere else. But you may have discovered someone on your team is a very creative thinker and they're not bogged down by linear thinking or past experience. They're very creative. So how can we maximize those? And in mitigating their weaknesses, what can you do to mitigate your own weaknesses? How can you make them to where they have less of an impact and they're less negative on you? Is it possible that they may be in the wrong spot? So here's Patrick Mahomes. I live in Lubbock, Texas. I'm an alumni of Texas Tech University, and that's in Lubbock. And when Patrick Mahomes came to Tech, he was a quarterback and he was also recruited as a pitcher. And he went through the very first year here and he proved to be a very, very good quarterback. Okay. I don't know how much you're familiar with. He was a very, very good quarterback. He went into baseball that season and he was not a very good pitcher. When he came back for the second season in football, he was an exceptional quarterback. And everybody knows what happened after that. So is it possible that we have a great employee in the wrong capacity or the wrong position? That's very possible to have, but we may not have ever realized that. So I mentioned the book Good to Great earlier. Jim Collins, even if you've never read the book, never heard of the book, you've probably heard of this concept before. He was the originator of get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seat on the bus. So you may have a great employee that you've got in the wrong position, wrong capacity. We're not utilizing their strengths as much as we could. Don't allow their job title to stifle the best ways to utilize them in solving problems. You may be able to plug them in somewhere different and get better results from them or maximize their strengths. As you implement and execute your plan, make sure that you track progress. You don't want to look up a year from now and not realize what a huge difference you've made. We want to be able to see that progress. We want to share that with them. When we have a performance appraisal, and again, I'm big on calling performance appraisals, not annual reviews or evaluations or whatever. Appraisal conjures the idea bringing value. I want to talk about how your performance has brought value to our team. Well, when I do a performance appraisal, I want to show the growth that I've seen in them. If we can't find any, we got a problem. But we want to celebrate with them and acknowledge to them, yes, we noticed you grew. Yes, we noticed that you tried new things. Yes, we noticed that you fully engaged in the coaching plan that we had, or you responded well to the coaching criticism that we gave you back, 6 months ago or whatever the case may be. We want to mark that progress and see where we are along the way, both as a team and for the individuals. If there are commitments made to the team, then there should be accountability to the team. I'm sure you've heard the expression before, discipline or praise in public, discipline in private. My only disagreement with that is if they have made a commitment to the team to have something done by a certain time, to disseminate something, to research something, to whatever it may be, to get a new plan out, to get a new spreadsheet out, to get a new web-based project management system in place. If they made that commitment to the team and a team member asked them about that in a team meeting, I will let that play out. I'm not going to add to it and beat them up in front of team members, but if they made a commitment to the team, then they should be accountable to the team. As we're working through adversity and we delegate new and different tasks than what people do on a normal daily basis, then that may trigger some conversations that are not a normal daily basis conversation. And I'm going to let there be peer or what I call mutual accountability. Is there upstream accountability? Can your team members hold the manager accountable? Can you hold your manager accountable? That's upstream accountability. And I think that those have got to be there. When you look at the characteristics of a great team, I think that's one of the true characteristics that they all share. There is mutual accountability, not just top down because the boss said so, because we have to. is it a characteristic of your team? If that's the characteristic of a great team, is it a characteristic of your team? And you've really got to be willing to face the truth on that deal, because it may not be true. Will you commit to working on making that more of a reality over the course of the next year? Because there's going to be some difficulties that come with that by itself. If you commit to that, there's going to be some growing pains in there, and not everybody's going to love that. I would strongly encourage you, reevaluate constantly. You're constantly looking, you're constantly refining, we're constantly looking to see what we need to do different. Stay agile along the way. Don't be rigid, don't be unbending. Now, again, you want to hold to your principles, but again, that boat can move with the chain and the anchor around, with the chain and the wind and current and all around the anchor, as long as the anchor doesn't move. But we want to stay agile so we don't get broken off at the base, at the root. And again, for somebody like me, agility is hard because I'm a linear thinker. If we have decided something, then in my thinking, we need to stick with that decision. But it may be that we didn't make the best decision, or we see a new opportunity, a new option, a new consideration that we didn't take into account last time. So I want to stay agile there. And if you've ever heard the expression before, if you're fighting a 400-pound gorilla, you don't quit when you get tired, you quit when the gorilla gets tired. Tired is not an option. Well, I just get tired of having to tell them all the time this and that. Okay, tired's not an option. You got to keep telling them. You got to find a better way, a different way, a more creative way to tell them. Well, I just get tired of having to be the one who comes around all the time, and I'm the only one who really is trying to put any new ideas in. Okay, tired's not an option. If you're going to lead through adversity, you can't quit when you get tired. You quit when you overcome the adversity. You've got to stay committed to the fight. You've got to stay true to the course and continue leading your team, because for many team members, what they're looking for is an opportunity to give up. So if the leader gives up, they give up. You've got many other team members, what they're looking for is somebody to give them direction. They've got the energy, they've got the commitment, they've got the willingness, they just don't have the vision. I want to use those people to win over the other people. And we're going to keep trudging through this no matter how tired we get, because we don't know how long it's going to last. And again, COVID was our last major widely held form of adversity. I can't tell you what it's going to be next year, but everybody's going to have something. You may have something different before the end of this year. You may have something different before the end of summer, but you can't quit just because you're tired. All right. So before I wrap up completely, I want to say I'm open to your questions, and I am happy to try to answer those and clarify anything I may have caused confusion on or closed gaps that I've left. So I'm going to show you my email address in just in a second. If you will email me or call me or connect with me through my website, e3professionaltrainers.com. It's an S on the end, e3professionaltrainers.com. I will be happy to either try to respond through email or set up a time that we can talk. And I can give you more clarification, more backfill, more specificity, whatever it would help you to know that. So here's the way you can connect with me, multiple ways actually. You can connect with me. And I will also say that I want to offer some resources to you. So if you've heard me talk today and hopefully you downloaded the handout before this started and did that, but if you'd like a PDF of the slides, I'm happy to send that to you. I've got some different things. I've got several articles and things that you can use on communication. How can we communicate more effectively? Because you may be great at the task side of things, but not as great at the people side of things. I've got one sheets and short articles on how to hold accountability conversations. How can we talk through somebody through accountability without it becoming a confrontation? I've got things on conflict resolution. I've got all kinds of resources that have to do with personal productivity and employee engagement. If that would be helpful to you, if you'll just shoot me an email, I will share anything I've got with you. For you to have that. I would also say on Facebook, on Twitter, the E3 Zine, I have lots of resources that will better equip you to lead other people. Leadership and management, time management and organization skills, communication, conflict resolution, teamwork, team building, personal excellence, as well as employee engagement. I've got all that stuff, and I am 100% willing to share with you, but because we're on Zoom, I have no way to connect with you today. So reach out to me and I will send you any of that you need, and I'll be happy to provide you with an opportunity for us to talk, so we can do that if you would like. As we wrap up, and I look at going through adversity. And I've certainly, I mean, I was in the business world when 9/11 happened. I was there. The '08 crash came. I've been through COVID. I've seen all this, worked through it all. Many people who are not in a leadership role will respond to the leadership that is in front of them. And so if you stay committed and you stay energized and you stay positive and you stay creative to work through that, they will jump on board with you and follow you through that. Adversity can create bonds that'll make it harder for people to leave. So if you make it through an adverse circumstance and you have team members that go through that together, that may make them even less likely to ever look to go somewhere else. They want to stay with that team that they've gone through that with. And so you can hang on to your better employees that way. If you hired for specific skills and those specific skills have turned out to not translate into it's a great toolbox for overcoming adversity, maybe you need to add some questions in your interviewing process so that you identify those people who have done that. What did you do last time you experienced it? Here's what we say. Tell me about a time when you experienced adversity and, what you did. Well, they've already got their scripted answer for that, right? During COVID, what was the most creative thing you did to stay in touch with your teammates? When we experienced working remotely, working from home, what did you do to try to make sure that you self-managed, that you were self-disciplined enough to keep going? Sit down, really think about it, and add some questions to your interview process that would help you to identify those who are going to be best prepared and best equipped to help you go through adversity the next time it comes up. Okay. So here's the last thing that I would share with you. When you think about a little squirrel, whether they're in Yellowstone or whether they're in the frozen tundra or wherever they may be, snow or sunshine, rain, dry, whatever it is, that squirrel still got to eat. It doesn't matter how much the weather has turned bad. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. They are still fighting to survive. In spite of adversity, you are still responsible and accountable to be productive and meet the expectations of your customer base, whoever that is, whoever the demanding person, whoever the unreasonable person is, whoever the crusty, prickly person is, who's kind of got spines around the edges and they're hard to hug. You're still responsible for meeting the requirements of your job and being productive, meeting those expectations. And so I would just challenge you to look at the adversity as this is a reality and I still have a job to do. And here's how I'm going to lead my team through that. Hope this has been helpful to you as you viewed it today. Again, please feel free to reach out to me and I will be glad to talk with you about ideas or answers or bounce an idea. You can bounce something off me and to provide you those resources. Jude, thank you so much for having me today. I hope that the conference went well and I hope that this virtual presentation was for you as well. I'm Randy Anderson.
Thank you. Randy, thank you for an excellent presentation. To those of you viewing this session, we'd like to thank you as well for tuning in. And remember, if you have any questions or desire additional information, please take Randy up on his very generous offer to be contacted directly. Aaron, it's a wrap.